I want to give you a masterclass in sales, business development, and getting through this bureaucracy. If I have an idea and I need to get through all of this bureaucracy, I need to present it to the government. How would you approach it?
Well, it's taken me about 10 years.
Meet Anne Attridge, founder and CEO of Click-Tolan Limited. Having worked in the public sector as a chattered teacher, her zeal for education made her found Click-Tolan, a tech-based company combining skills in linguistics, design and programming to develop language learning for a new generation.
What you are doing is very hard. And again, I think anything that will be worthwhile in this planet Earth, most of them are usually hard. How do you stay motivated?
I suppose it's just partly...
Don't just talk, listen. You said that's your mantra, right? What did listening to learners, how has it helped you to build your...
I think we have to listen to a number of different people, right? We have to listen to the end user, and we're very keen on getting their feedback. Right? And I think it's a question of also realising quite quickly who it's worth listening to and who it's not worth listening to. Because you can listen to a lot of people who tell you wonderful things, right? But they have no intention or ability to follow through. Right?
Follow through. Welcome everybody to today's episode. Today we are going to be talking to Anne. She's the CEO and the founder of Click-to-Learn, a technology-based company that helps people learn English language. And today we are going to be looking at his journey in how she moved from the classroom to being a tech founder. We're going to be looking at the journey, the win, the low, the highs, and the lessons we can learn from it at the end of this episode. So once again, welcome, Anne. It's good to have you once again.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start differently this time around. I want to know a little bit about you. I want to know how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Where were you born? I want to, in this session, I want to understand how your formative year had, and I want to know the impact it has on what you are currently doing now.
Right. Okay, well, I've got a mixed background in terms of where I was brought up. I started in Glasgow, and then my family moved to the Isle of Skye, which is quite unusual, right? So I went from city centre to lots of green spaces and hills and lochs and so on. I think one of the things that looking back that helped with was just a sense of reliance on yourself. I mean, there are not the same support services in that part of the world, but there is freedom to explore things, to do things yourself, and I think that growing up there gave me that mindset.
Awesome. So you were born in the city, then you moved to Isle of Skye.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. So let's talk a little bit about how you started Click-to-Learn. What was the problem you were initially trying to solve?
Well, I suppose it's a problem of access and problem of improving quality as well, because there are huge opportunities beginning to open up with technology that allowed us to connect with other people and to deliver learning completely differently to working in the classroom, thereby reaching a lot more people and generally, I suppose, engaging people more with education who might otherwise have been left behind.
Wow. That's so thoughtful of you, yeah? And I think that's one of the hallmark of anybody who wants to do business and really, really do well, is that you need to be able to find a problem, right? So at what point did you spent about 20 years in the classroom. At what point did you realize you could really use technology to fast track, to make learning better?
Well, it was at the very early stages of technology appearing in education, and I was invited to join a joint research programme with 2 or 3 universities in Scotland to try to link academics with students within the classroom. That was quite innovative in those days, right? And what it did was it allowed us access to what was then called a VLE, a virtual learning environment.
Oh,
That
so-
was old technology now, of course, but at that point it was quite revolutionary. And I began to watch how some of the students just began to flourish and blossom by having access to this, and beginning to connect with people in other parts of the world. And yeah, it was just a bit inspirational.
Wow.
And it was
Wow.
as a result of that I thought, well, this is something big, right? This is going to transform education, but it's not going to transform it in the state system, right? Because education tends to pretty much do what it's always done for year after year. It's difficult to innovate in that environment. So I started looking for other opportunities.
I want you to go a little bit deeper into something you just said now, that it's difficult to innovate in the education system. How do you mean?
Well, it's difficult from the point of view of the practitioner in the classroom because you are bound by a whole raft of regulations, exam requirements from the government, from the local council, and particularly at that time, curriculum for excellence was being introduced, and we each had a very large green folder.
Wow.
With many pages in it, and we were obliged to follow the instructions in this. It was a very bureaucratic system,
Wow.
and there was no room at that point for using
Creativity.
technology. And the other problem, as I alluded to, was the expense of having devices in the classroom. I mean, it was not unusual to have whiteboards in a room, but no technology to support that, no software, right? So yeah, there's a whole issue around devices and access. You're lucky if you've got maybe one room with computers in it. So yeah, there's all sorts of barriers, if you like, to being creative with technology.
You came from a very, very traditional profession into technology, where people they do a very, very good job, and everybody knows that teachers are the least paid profession, and they do almost the most important work in the society, which is teaching the next generation of children, people, giving them a better future, educating them, but they get paid, the least. And one of the things that this kind of environment creates is that people tend to stay in that career for, that's mostly what they do throughout their life. What made you come into technology? Because again, it's something that is rare. I'm sure you can count up to 5 persons that that you are a teacher together, that it is now a tech entrepreneur.
You're right. I mean, it is difficult. It's unusual what I've been able to do, because most tech companies, especially in the EdTech space, tend to be founded by tech people rather than educational people, and there's a very good reason for that. It's just difficult to break into. I was very fortunate in that I had an opportunity to enter a competition through Strathclyde University, which then opened up a completely new world in terms of business, right? And shortly after that, I was recommended to apply for a Royal Society of Edinburgh fellowship. That was the key. That opened the door, because I almost against the odds, I was successful with that. That allowed me to leave my job, which otherwise would have been very difficult. And I had a year to turn myself into some kind of business person, entrepreneur, tech person. And that was the opportunity that I had to then see where the business could go.
Impressive. That's, again, this is, I don't believe in luck. I don't believe that luck as, you get lucky by working hard on the things that you want to do, having an idea, going after it, doing it. Maybe when you do it, when people see you are passionate about it, that's when opportunities opens for you. So, do you remember the day that you actually think this could actually be a business?
I remember the day I got the email saying I'd been given a fellowship.
Impressive.
There was a bit of dancing around the room at that point, right?
Impressive.
So
Tell me about it.
it was, I mean, I look back and I think how naive I was then about business. I knew nothing or very little. I didn't really know much about tech either, but I knew what I wanted to try and achieve. And that was, I think, it was it's been a very big learning experience from then to where I am now.
You got a Royal Society of Edinburgh Enterprise Fellowship. And what did that experience teach you about turning an idea into a business?
Well, it was, there was a program, obviously, which we went through, where we started to look at our own personalities and attributes and so on. We got training in networking, in finance, in building a product, building a team, and obviously the interaction with I had about 5 or 6 other people on the program at the time, all completely different from myself. We learned a lot from each other. We had to write many business plans, most of which were complete rubbish, but it was an experience, it was a discipline. And I think it just allowed us that space to transition from either academia or from work into the realities of running a business and growing a team. I had nothing other than an idea in my head at that point, and in fact, it's turned into something quite different. But that's what business teaches you. You have to adapt very quickly,
Adapt
and change
pivot.
and pivot, and according to what the market will allow you to do.
Definitely. I love the fact that you quickly learned that, and you are able to pivot. I read somewhere that Samsung started as a food store. They kept pivoting and pivoting till it became the Samsung that we now know today. And for most businesses, most entrepreneurs, they are unable to take that pivot because from research, it is very hard or very difficult for you as an entrepreneur to know what the customer wants. You may have a very good idea, but until you bring the idea out to the customer before you really know what they really want, or even if they want that product, they may want it delivered to them in a specific way, and they are willing to pay for that specific thing, not necessarily how you imagine how it is going to be done. So for you, I want you to talk to me a little bit about what lessons did you learn about making pivots, making changes, and being flexible as an entrepreneur?
I think certainly that became very obvious towards the end of the fellowship, when there was a lot more emphasis on sales.
Oh.
Okay. And because you can become fired up with your own passion, your own ideas about what you want to do, what you want to create, and forget that if you don't sell anything, you're not going to last very long.
You don't have a business.
So that's been a rude lesson I've had to learn many, many times. And I think the problem, if you like, with EdTech is that you're not selling directly. Well, unless you're perhaps a language app, which we didn't want to go down that consumer route for a whole variety of reasons. Your end user is not paying, right? So we are primarily a B2B business, right? Which I don't regret because at the end of the day, it has proved to be the right choice in that we are now able to deliver at scale.
Impressive.
To governments, for example. But that's a very hard nut to crack.
I can imagine.
And it requires a lot of patience, a lot of resilience, a lot of just digging in and waiting for things to happen, because in education, nothing changes quickly. And then you're at the mercy of government funding, and that can be multi-layered very often. That's another minefield. Right? So yes, I think it was The commercial reality that I wasn't fully aware of at all to start with, and the difficulty of actually finding the right person to pay. And it's not even just getting to the decision maker, it's getting to a decision maker that understands the problem as well and that cares about the problem, because in a lot of cases things can just go on as they are and people are happy with that, right? But that's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to, if I give the UK as an example, there is a massive number of people in the country who are unable to work because they don't have enough language skills.
Wow.
And they can't get access to language learning in any traditional way, right? So we're now beginning to demonstrate to people that we can solve that problem through technology.
Wow. I wanted to write that down. Like, you are now able to demonstrate to people that you can solve that particular problem, which is, I think, is a huge problem. It is, you have a very, very large market. You made mention of something which I find very, very intriguing, amazing. I love it. Most people hate it, which is sales. If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you can't do sales, I don't think it is meant for you. Or if you can find a co-founder that will have to do that for you. Because like we are saying, you could have an idea and in your mind it is good until you present that idea to decision makers, before you know if you have an idea or not. And you did mention of B2B sales, which is, although it may have, in fact, I know some people who don't do B2B at all because of all of the bureaucracy, the time it takes, the patience it takes. I want you to give me a master class in sales, business development, and getting through this bureaucracy. How will you, if I have an idea and I need to get through all of this bureaucracy, I need to present it to the government, how will you approach it?
Well, it's taken me about 10 years to learn that business.
Impressive.
It's not quick. It's not quick.
Awesome. So what we are going to learn now is something that has been condensed for the last 10 years. We can take something away from it.
Well, I think the first thing that I had to struggle with was changing from the original idea of creating a platform, which is what a lot of EdTech companies do, right? Tutoring platforms or things like that, into creating content. And that was a bit of a shock when I suddenly realized platform's not going to work, right? At least it's going to be very difficult to stand out in that field. So I started to go down the route of creating content, and that was purely drawing on my own, initially on my own experience. I don't have a co-founder. I've never had a co-founder.
Yes.
And in some respects, I don't regret that, because I watched other people going through the program with me. They had co-founders, sometimes 3 or 4 co-founders, and that was quite complicated because they all had different agendas and different aspirations, and trying to reconcile that was problematic. I'm also glad I didn't actually have a spin out from a university, because that again leads you into another avenue of bureaucracy and ownership of IP, and that can be quite fraught. So I had the freedom to do my own thing, if you like. So we started creating content, but it had to be content that was accredited. It wasn't just, it had to have some backing so that we had credibility in the market. So we went down the route of having it endorsed by the SQA, and also then latterly by City and Guilds, which gives you, it gives people some security, if you like, over the quality of what you've done. So that was a very slow process, because I had a very, very small amount of initial investment. I had to make that last for a long time. I had no team, so I had to build people, a group of people who could realise this. I'm at that space now. I've got a smashing little team, really super little team, but that's taken a long time. A lot of mistakes along the way. So we then started creating content, and then more content, and then more content. And as you do that, you are basically aligning more and more to what the market needs, both in the UK and overseas. And we have a very flexible offer now to people. We have a platform, yes. We have a lot of data, and I think that's the one thing that differentiates us from the traditional model, if you like. We can give insights into learning and into engagement, which you simply can't get in a classroom, right? And if you've got a lot of government money going into something, they want to be able to see what is happening. They want to be able to measure in detail, and that is what we are continually improving, right? And we're also, I know there have been various attempts by other language companies to introduce humans into the process as well, because it does matter, right? If you simply give somebody a login, they're not going to learn. That's not the solution by itself. And so we bring in, we have a blended learning approach.
That's good.
For some programs, and that is crucial. So yeah, it's been a constant evolution of the product, of the offer that we make to people, and of the type of service that we deliver. And more, I was actually quite shocked when I first realised that I was going to have to put a lot of effort into customer service. Okay. It's not just creating a wonderful product and saying, here it is, off you go. So that is a very big part of what we do now.
Impressive. I'm just trying to just imagine. I'm closing my eyes trying to imagine your colleagues that were teachers when you were starting. This is still going back to the time you started. When you explain to them what you are trying to do, what kind of reaction do you usually get?
Bafflement. They were bewildered. What on earth are you doing? They couldn't understand at all. They weren't particularly interested, right? I mean, there are a lot of teachers, I'm not denigrating the profession, I have had some wonderful times, but there are a lot of teachers, when they reach a certain age, they just want to retire, right? They don't really want to take on a challenge like this, right? And I suppose if I had realised how long it was going to take and how difficult it would be, I probably wouldn't have done it either. But once you start something and you can see the potential, then you keep going. Yeah.
Impressive. So what was the early days like for you? Were you learning how to code? Were you going out to do presentation? Were you creating content for the platform? How was it for you, the early days?
Yeah, well, my main role is as a sort of insight into education. I mean, I've worked in a lot of different sectors. I've worked in the sector that we initially started trying to sell into, right? And that was interesting because the first time I went along, thinking I had something wonderful to a college, the first thing that the person said to me was, "I hope you're not trying to sell me something."
I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
Right, that was not an unusual reaction. Okay, there was a suspicion about being in the private sector, about being a rampant capitalist, right, which was very far from the truth. Very still is far from the truth. And also a sense of, who do you think you are? We do this, right? We don't need you, right? A resistance to technology, and a suspicion that perhaps it would affect their jobs in the long term, right? As it undoubtedly will, right? So it was very hard, and still is in the UK market, right? We are having more success now with overseas work. But that again has been a huge journey of pain and disappointment in basically trying to find the right partners overseas who have got the right, who understand what you're doing and who want to work with you, as opposed to just simply try to make money from you.
Talk to me about that.
Well, for a variety of reasons, some partly personal, because my mother was brought up in India, right? So India was always a large part of our sort of family history. I thought India would be a good place. There's a massive youth population over there, a lot of differentiation between those who can afford private education and those who can't, right? So we wanted to concentrate on the public state schools, right? And basically I made the wrong decision about who we would partner with and what we would invest in that area, and it took me, I suppose, 2 years to realise that was a big mistake. We've now found an excellent company to work with and beginning to open up those opportunities. But I think doing things as a small team remotely in a country where you don't have any influence is very difficult.
That's one of the lessons that every businesses that wants to go global has to go through. So because I do work with businesses that are here in Scotland, and they are trying to expand into places like US, even though it's look alike, but there are some nuances that one has to still go through, if you may. So you said, don't just talk, listen. You said that's your mantra, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what did listening to learners, how has it helped you to build your company?
I think we have to listen to a number of different people, right? We have to listen to the end user, and we're very keen on getting their feedback, right? And I think it's a question of also realizing quite quickly who it's worth listening to and who it's not worth listening to, right? Because you can listen to a lot of people who tell you wonderful things, right? But they have no intention or ability to follow through, right?
Follow through.
And I think that is something that, because you want to hear good news, you focus in on that bit of it, and you don't really listen to the potential pitfalls or difficulties that are not mentioned. So it's a question of, I think, gradually being a little bit more skeptical when you're listening to people, because they will sometimes flatter you and but have no real intention of doing anything.
Following through. Following through. And again, one of the hallmark of any business that is going to do well is your ability to be able to listen to what your customers are saying. I think if you know, and I also love the fact that you said don't just talk, listen. It helps too in sales. Well, I don't know if it works in B2B sales, the kind of bureaucratic sales that you do. If you want to sell to somebody, one of the things, the most important thing for you is to listen to their problem. If you understand their problem, you can see and honestly see if the solution you are selling is for them. And if it is not for them, you say this is not for you. If it is for them, you'll be able to say, okay, from my understanding, this is your problem, this is your problem, this is your problem, and this is how we solve the problem. This is how we solve the problem. This is how we solve the problem. Thank you so much. So we are going to be moving to building the product. Okay, and for someone watching who's never heard of digital ESOL before, how does Click to Learn actually? How does this platform? How does it work for a learner?
Well, we had to face a really interesting challenge, which was presented to us over and over again, especially in the UK market, but any other market as well. How do you deliver learning of a language to somebody who has no language, right? They have no understanding
Of the
of
language.
English, yes, right?
English.
They don't understand the letters. They come from a language which has a different script, completely different history,
It's different.
and they don't understand any spoken, right? So
Mm.
we started with, if you like, a product that wasn't at that level, but people kept saying, oh, well, that's no good because I've got people who don't understand anything. You know, I've got people who are not literate in their own language, for example. So how do you tackle that? Now, we spent about 2 years developing a product
Wow.
for that market, right? So we have a product that takes people from absolutely no knowledge of English through to, well,
Really?
yeah, right. That was difficult, but that really is where I suppose my years spent in. Well, I did a lot of research into linguistics as well. We spent in teaching at that level and also thinking about it, studying it. Had I not had that experience, I couldn't have produced that product, right? And I think that's why it's probably still the only one out there that does that. Most of the big, I mean, our competitors are obviously people like Duolingo, Babel, Busuu, but also the big publishers, traditional publishers, Pearson, Macmillan, Cambridge, Oxford, and so on. They didn't have anything at that level, right?
Wow.
So that has opened up a lot of opportunities for us because a lot of the market that we address is in that space, right? So that from a product point of view was a challenge, but it won an Elton's Award. The British Council run a big international competition every year. British Council, by the way, earn most of their money from English language teaching.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, they do other things as well, but the commercial side is all down to. But that was based on a very traditional model of going along to an embassy, for example, and having a class there, right? Their business model collapsed during COVID, understandably. Okay, so there has been I think it's been a lot easier for us post-COVID to propose a digital solution.
Everybody now has
Yeah,
welcome
well,
to it.
people are not so concerned about having to do things online. It's just the way things happen now. So that product, I think, was a bit of a game changer for us,
Impressive.
right? And then, as technology has developed, we've moved to the upper end. We actually pivoted into a very high stakes exam that doctors and nurses have to do. If they're educated overseas, they have to prove a high standard of English to work either in the UK or the States or Australia or whatever. And we developed, or we still are, I think, the only fully digital provider of that product, right? And because technology is constantly evolving and giving us new things to try, we've built speech recognition and AI assessment into that product. And the other big market that we're about to launch into is the IELTS market, which is the market, you need to pass IELTS to get into university or a management job or whatever. And so we are embracing AI, but in a controlled way, right? It's been quite a long journey already, just getting it to work the way we want it to work, where we need it to work. It has churned out some absolute rubbish.
Always hallucinating.
But it's also capable of doing things that it can much faster than we can do as human beings.
Yeah,
right? So I think it's a fascinating area for us to move into, and it does mean, that we can cut our reliance on human tutors to mark things, for example, to mark mock exams, which are important if you're doing a big high stakes exam, and to use AI to guide people at scale. And that's what we've always been striving for, to be able to reach bigger audiences, bigger numbers than you can with, relying on human beings all the time.
Wow, you've really really done well for yourself, and with this business, taking it from one step to another, from Royal College of Edinburgh, moving, and you are constantly innovating. How can I? Is this something that can be learned? How can I become innovative as a person?
It's a difficult one. I think you've either got the mindset that wants to find a new way of doing things, right? And to not simply be comfortable or satisfied with the way things are done. And I think you've got to have a drive to make a difference, frankly, because it's not necessary. You could choose to do something, to stay as you are, if you like. So I think that curiosity about wanting to change things and how you can do that, I think is essential. I don't know if you can actually teach that, right? But I think, from a practical point of view, running a business like this, we've had to be innovative because you can't, as a small company, you can't compete and do the same things as the big players are doing because they'll always win.
They'll hit you for
Right,
breakfast.
yeah. So you have to do things differently, right? And certainly from a digital perspective, we were doing things that bigger companies weren't doing at the time. We could have gone faster if we'd had more resources, but that's another story. I think having the opportunity to innovate has driven us into basically doing a lot of innovation grants. That's what kept us going, frankly. We worked with Innovate UK. We worked with a Smart Grant. That kind of opportunity is still out there, and that has its own discipline. But it's one way of being able to do this.
Wow, that's pretty intensive, pretty neat. I'm proud of what you have achieved in this number of years. Most people would have given up. Most people would have just thrown in the towel because what you are doing is very hard. And again, I think anything that will be worthwhile in this planet Earth, most of them are usually hard. How do you stay motivated?
I suppose it's just partly I don't like giving up, and I think that's you have to have that determination, but at the same time, sometimes there is no choice. I was fortunate in that I was able to just survive from year to year. I had an extremely good chairman. And that was a key to our success, especially in the early years. Chairman and investor, Nick Koonsberg, who sadly passed away several years ago. But I think that's something I would advise every founder to try to find a mentor or somebody who has confidence in you and who's willing to back you and support you. I think without that, we would have probably found it very difficult to continue.
That's a very, very poignant point you've just raised. How can I find a mentor? How can give me a blueprint that everybody watching can use to find a mentor? And again, let me quickly give you a background. I believe most people that have approached me for mentorship are very, very lazy. What they are actually looking for is somebody to just baby them, be calling them, have you done this, have you done that? No, it is not everybody building anything that is worthy of mentorship. In fact, some people are not building anything, they are looking for mentorship. They want the mentorship to show them what to build it for them, and hand it over to them, baby them for a very, very long time. That has been my experience, and I see the same kind of thing happen to so many of my colleagues too. You get random DMs, in the age of social media, say, "Can you be my mentor?" I'm like, "Mentor you to do what exactly?" So can you give me a blueprint on getting mentor?
Well, I'm not sure it's as easy as that. I think to some extent, although any business, you have to have a lot of qualities in terms of resilience and determination and so on, there is an element of luck, right? There is an element of getting the timing right, being in the right place at the right time. And the mentor that I was fortunate to have was also an investor. And I think that's another thing to be very careful about. When you take investment, you should have somebody who is not just simply throwing some money at you and hoping that some years down the line they'll get more money back, but somebody who's actually interested and wants to be involved in the business. Now, that's a balance, obviously. And I was fortunate enough to get my chairman from my first investment panel, right? So he understood, he'd listened to the pitch. He was very frank about our chances of success at that point, which were not great. But he stuck with us through the years. And it wasn't a question of him telling us what to do. It was simply he was always there to bounce ideas off. But we were running the business, right? And he was keeping us right on the governance side, on the finance side, all the things that we didn't have the skills for at that point. He was a very experienced businessman.
Impressive.
Right? And to some extent, looking back, I suppose I was very fortunate that he was on the panel and he said, I will be the chairperson for this company. And he did so literally until a few days before he died.
Oh my goodness.
It was amazing. Yeah.
Wow. When did this happen?
Oh, well, the first investment was about in 2012, right? And he died in 2022.
Wow. That was like 10 years.
Yeah, so I haven't replaced him, right? To some extent, he was irreplaceable. But he was the kind of person that would help if a particular problem came up or there was a crisis. He was there. But he allowed us to do what we wanted to do as well. So it wasn't. It was a very supportive relationship, but not one where we expected him, if you like, to do things for us. But he was always there to give advice about strategy and about, governance and the legal side.
Impressive. So what this is telling us is if you are looking to get investors, one should try to balance it. Not just look for somebody that's just going to throw in money and expect a large return later. And it should be a balance of having experience, interest in the particular business that you are building, right?
Yes, and also an interest in the space you're in, the market you're in. I mean, he had a background and he was a very international businessman. He'd worked in lots of different countries. He spoke about 5 languages, right?
Wow.
So he had an understanding of language learning, really. And I think that's the biggest thing I would want to encourage people to, when you build your team, try and build a team who understand your product and understand your market, right? I've made the mistake several occasions of bringing in marketing people who didn't understand education, right? And that was a big problem, right? Because the way you sell and talk to buyers in the education market is quite different from selling cars or being in fintech or any of the other tech spaces where you're dealing with private companies very often who are not strapped for cash, right? So who don't understand anything. If you have someone who doesn't understand anything about learning, but my chairman did, and that I think was what made it such a useful partnership for us, and one which I haven't always been able to replicate with sales. And, you know, I mean, to give you an example, one salesman I brought in at a very, very significant salary was asked to do a quotation that we'd been invited to apply for, a tender, right? He came up with something that was close to £1 million, and I couldn't persuade him that he was talking absolute rubbish until, of course, we lost the tender, and the actual value of that particular deal was in the region of 40,000. That was that gap of understanding, okay? That's what I mean about having people in your company who understand the market you're in, right?
It's not even double.
Yeah, it was just crazy. But at that point, he'd come from fintech, and he wanted to prove that he could get the first £1 million deal for us. Oh. And I knew it was ridiculous. But I wasted a lot of time
invested in putting the tender together. Oh my goodness. Oh,
it's a difficult and slow market to get traction in. The lead-in time, average lead-in time for a sale could be anything from 6 months to 2 years. You have to be, you have to be able to survive. You have to be able to survive.
You have to be able to. You must be ready for the long haul.
Yeah,
you must be ready for the long haul. Yeah. So Han, you've built the first digital SQA qualification. For somebody who is just listening to this, what does that mean?
Well, it's not a qualification. I mean, that's the other thing we've got to be very careful about. We're a preparation provider.
Preparation for the qualification.
Preparation for the qualification. We're not an awarding body. And we work with City and Guilds as an awarding body. And we have a distribution agreement with them. But that, I mean, to give you another example of patience, they recently moved from they're a massive company, global company, huge number of customer bases. But they changed their platform to a new learning management system, right? And that meant we had to change as well. That process has taken 2.5 years.
What?
Yeah.
To do the migration?
We're just about to sign the agreement again now. But that's how long it can take sometimes. If you are a small company working with a very large organization, it's worth, if you can get to that stage, yes, but it does take a lot of patience and a lot of effort. So yeah, I would not, I would not want people to think that EdTech is an easy market to move
especially
into.
the kind of model you've chosen, which is to be B2B.
Yes.
B2B are rather, long, tedious, arduous, bureaucratic. Oh my goodness.
Yes, and not even that. I mean, quite often the frustrating thing that we find is that there are some very large opportunities out there, but we are disqualified because we don't have maybe 7 or 8 million pound turnover.
Ooh.
Right. So there are criteria that really favour big companies being able to get big contracts, not small companies.
Impressive.
That's.
And there are sometimes that the contract is for small companies too,
Well, they say in principle, yes, they want to encourage SMEs, but then when you get to the financial qualifications, you realise that you're not gonna make it, right? And there may be other barriers as well with the compliance, ISO compliance and so on.
Glasgow Life and City of Glasgow College. You've had partnership with them.
Glasgow Life.
Yeah.
Glasgow Life they are a charity, but they're related or connected with the council. Okay. So they're our main partner in the work we're doing in the city. We work also very closely with the DWP now.
Impressive.
And that's where practically all of our students come from. So they are clients of the DWP.
I want us to talk about how can I form partnership, this kind of partnership with big organization. How does it work?
Well, it never works with a straight proposal and a straight acceptance or rejection. It usually involves a pilot, right? And that's how we have to work with a lot of large organizations. Very often we have to be prepared to work for nothing for a period of time to try, so they can try the product out and get a feel for how it works. So we have done that on a small scale with Glasgow Life really for many years. I think the key to breaking into something bigger and being able to work at scale with them was just being fortunate enough to find the right person in the organization. That is always a difficulty, right? Someone who has got the decision-making ability, but who also cares about the problem, because he will still or she will still get their salary at the end of the month if they don't solve the problem, right? Yeah. And that's where the challenge very often comes. Yes, you've got a solution to a problem, but why should I bother? Is the kind of attitude you can meet, right?
Which is understandable.
In the public sector, yeah.
I love the fact that you mentioned that if they do it or not, they still get their salary at the end of the month. There is no incentive for them to make a change. And again, change is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. And that's very often the attitude in a lot of educational establishments as well. People will pick up their salary if they're good or bad or indifferent. Very often. Okay. And it's not in their interest sometimes to rock the boat.
Yeah, there is an incentive for maintaining the status quo.
Yes, very much so. An incentive to comply, right? If you ask questions, people get uncomfortable sometimes. Like, why are we doing it this way? Why are we not doing it that way? And just do it.
Why are you asking questions? Just do it. At the end of the month, take your salary, go home. Mm-hmm. So, talking about technology and learning, how do you decide, how do you know if technology is helping to engage learners or not? Is there a way for you to measure that?
Well, that's where the data comes in. I mean, we started off by just creating content, right? And then during COVID, we realized that wasn't enough. We really we built our own learning management system, basically. And it was designed specifically for people who didn't speak English. Most LMSs are the really big beasts. They cover a huge number of subjects. They're in big corporations and institutions, and they're quite confusing for the end user, if the end user is not a native speaker especially, right? So we designed our own, and that means that we host all of our content on that. It also means we control the data.
Okay.
And so, for example, now with the DWP, we give them weekly reports on the usage of their clients, and not just the time they spend, but the percentage that they complete, so we can drill down into the data and see exactly how many minutes and seconds somebody spends on an activity, and how quickly it takes them to complete various levels. All of our activities are pretty short, because attention span is what it is. These days it's getting less and less, right? So obviously for the more advanced level it's a bit longer. They have to read more, listen more, or whatever. But our aim was to be as interactive and fun, if you like, as Duolingo, but to be in a different market where the people that we work with, they have a real incentive to learn English. They want a job, right? that they have to prove, or they have to get a certificate, they have to prove their level to get citizenship or whatever, right? So we're in a sort of compliance market in a way, right? Rather than somebody who might just want to learn how to order beers when they go abroad, right? Right.
Impressive.
Different market.
Different market. Yeah. I love the way you distinguish yourself. Everybody's talking about unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
What's unique about you, and throughout this conversation, you have demonstrated, you have shown how this is different from, for instance, Duolingo. My next question for you is: how did you what are the thought process, what are the framework, what are the blueprints that you went through to be able to know that these are the areas I should focus on, these are the areas I should not focus on? Because, for instance, like you've rightly said, if you had focused in the same place, let's say Duolingo or Babel is focused on, you are definitely going to struggle. So how did you decide your niche? How did you pick it?
I think it comes from really a long time in the market. I think I think I would not have been able to make those decisions without really understanding the learning process and also the way the market works commercially, right? It was also, it was obvious, and if you look at the sort of history of Duolingo, for example, they started with a massive amount of capital. Right? I mean, what I got was like a few pennies, by comparison, right? So I didn't have the luxury of trying this, trying that. Doesn't matter if I fail, because I've got, I can keep going because I've got plenty in the bank. So I think necessity drives you to thinking really hard about strategy, right? I knew that if I was to go into the B2C market, I would need to have a very big marketing budget, right? And I didn't have that. So there really wasn't much of a choice in that sense. It took Duolingo several attempts to try to monetize what they had. I mean, their idea was give everything away free. Well, that's fine, but it doesn't sustain the business. It doesn't build your team, right? Unless you've got big backers who are willing keep
raising.
Right. So they tried translation, for example. They've I think, gone down the route of any app. Basically, you have to pay for it or you subscribe at some point. Although there is an element that's obviously free. But we were always in a different market where, it was never a serious option. I mean, that's why the refugee asylum seeker market, they can't get to where they need to be by doing Duolingo, right? It has a different style of teaching, a different style of learning, and it's for a different purpose. Okay.
For the person who wants to order beer when they travel.
So I'm not. I mean, it's a great product, and they've been extremely successful, but it wasn't really an option for us. So from a strategy point of view, I had to look at where the money was, right? And where the need was greatest, right? But even then, it's not a simple equation, if you like. India is a case in point where there obviously is a massive need and huge benefit if someone is competent in English in India. They can increase their earnings significantly over the course of a lifetime, right? Because of English is an official language out there, right? But that has taken more years than I care to think about, to get to the point of being successful in that market. It's not as simple as there's a problem, I've got a solution, I can win this, unfortunately.
What's one thing about building a tech company that no one prepared you for?
Sorry, what was the?
I said, what is it about building a technology company that no one prepared you for, considering you are coming from being a teacher? a classroom teacher?
I suppose it really was the commercial reality, you know, to be honest. Because, and I think every founder goes through this, they see the runway getting shorter and shorter. They think, how long can I keep going? Can I make payroll this month, right? That is something I wasn't prepared for, right? I thought the whole thing would be much easier, much quicker. I look back at some of my predictions, I think, wow, how ridiculous, right?
Oh my goodness.
I think even a lot of the people that I went through the fellowship with at that point, they've gone into consultancy or they've gone into jobs. They're not still trying to run a company and make ends meet, right? Because it is, well, no matter how much, how much academic research you've done or how wonderful you are in your own space, it's not always easy to turn that knowledge into a business. And I mean, especially if you're working in the pharma sector, you're not going to be able to start your own pharma company. There's too many big players out there who will just swallow you up or, get rid of you. So I think that's the one thing that I hadn't fully understood, and I'm still learning.
Well, because the next question is based on what you mentioned about, the people you did a fellowship together with. Some people are in consulting, which is understandable. Being an entrepreneur is very hard, very difficult. So some are gone back to working, some are consulting. Was there any moment for you where you also considered that?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. I think it was just purely and simply because we were running out of money at that point. We were not making sales. Grant money was coming to an end, and I thought, this is probably not going to be sustainable. Right? That's when my chairman wouldn't let me give up.
Wow.
Right? I can remember I was on the point of saying, look, this is not going to work. We just can't keep going. And he said, you've got to.
Oh, wow.
So that, I think, probably was, there have been a couple of low moments, but he stepped in and said, we're not going to give up. We're not going to let this fail. And I suppose it was that confidence in what we were doing and that willingness to offer practical help at that point that's the reason I'm still here today. And that I was just very fortunate. I did have somebody who believed in us to that level, and I, probably would have given up before now had it not been for him.
Wow. Still going back to the importance of having the right mentor, the right investor. So when funding or when funding gets tight, because most businesses die, I think there is a statistics that says most businesses die in the first 1 or 2 years, 80% of them because of lack of funding. Mm-hmm. When funding got tight for you, what kept you going?
Well, we had to make difficult decisions at that point. I think there was only, I quite frequently not taken a salary from the business. And I think that's not an unusual situation. I think that's something that other small businesses find themselves. And I was fortunate enough I could do that, right? Not everybody can, right? And that's why such a high percentage of businesses fail. There isn't the runway to allow them to continue until the product is finished, or it's been a very slow process in our case, developing our first few products. It's getting faster now, and I have a very experienced team. But the other thing was obviously because I didn't have large funds to rely on. I had to bring in people at a very early stage in their career, right?
Understandably.
Yeah, I couldn't afford big developers, right? Salaries of 80,000, 90,000 or something. That was just ridiculous. Or even salespeople. I still I have a part-time salesperson who's been with us since he graduated, which is great. But I think there was that. You obviously have to be determined to keep going and to do whatever it needs. So I work in sales, I work in product development, I do HR, I do recruitment, I do everything. Right now that will change hopefully, but there is that level of willingness to put on many hats that you have to keep going in the early days. And I've got very, very good at writing grant submissions. That's something that obviously my background helped me with. So it's a combination of things, and just being fortunate enough to, the team I have now have been with me now for quite some time, very experienced, very committed to what we're doing, but that's taken time, to get to that point. It's a long road, and I'm not surprised that there aren't many EdTech companies in Scotland.
Understandably. It's hard. Talking about team, your team, the people you work with, how do you balance, working with software developers, engineers, salespeople, educators who do not speak the same language, and you are sort of the bridge between the two of them? How do you balance them?
Well, I've had to learn quite a bit, obviously, right? So I can learn to speak the language, even if I can't actually do it. And I think it's all about sharing the vision with people, right? It's all about keeping the communication very real, so they understand. They're not sort of doing some back-end job in an office. They know exactly what we're trying to do, who we're engaging with, who we're helping, if you like. And I think the company obviously does have a social impact value, as well as simply, creating software. We're creating software that really makes a difference to people. And I think that's something that they understand and value. And I think giving people that sense of, and actually the opportunity, because we are small, they engage with our customers, and our end users. So they're not just simply, I quite deliberately give them the opportunity to talk to people, right?
Yeah. Wow. You've intentionally did that. Where did you learn that?
Where did
I said you've intentionally did that, so you've broken people's silo, and you are able to cast a much more wider vision. Because somebody, I was listening to somebody saying that people do not work for money alone.
Yeah.
People work for various reasons.
Yeah.
Money just happens to be one of them. You've been able to connect it with, helping people. You've been able to open up to them, the people who are funding this, the people they are serving. What I want to know is, where did you learn that framework?
I learned it from working with some very bad managers.
Oh.
Okay. I've been in situations where that didn't happen, and it caused huge problems, right? That disconnection between, if you like, management and everyone else, right? And no communication, no shared vision, none of that. I also, at one point, I did a management degree, and that helped me to fully understand the process, if you like, involved in success. To some extent, it's just a reflection too of I suppose, my character. I don't want to be perceived as the person who holds all the important information and keeps that from everyone else. I think it's to me obvious that if people can see the point of what they're doing, rather than just picking up their salary at the end of the month, then everyone needs a sense of purpose, right? Why am I doing this? And if they understand that, I think it's better for everybody.
Wow, that's something that I also find very, very home to me. Something I actually just learned now, and the people, we have a team of 4 persons that we do this together, and the same thing you've explained now, sharing the vision has made the work easier for me too. So because everybody now sees what we are trying to do, one of our goals is we want to be the best in the world, not the best in Glasgow. We want
Right.
to be the best in the world. So what will that entail? That will entail we are constantly innovating. We are constantly looking out for the best, the most experienced people to bring on board. It means we are putting all of our best, even in the production of the podcast, in getting the people that will help us shoot it, in the post-production, in the way we edit it. We are constantly shifting the goal for ourselves. And for the first time, I saw that people that I'm working with understood the vision, and it makes life does easy. I think I love the fact that you said you are, giving people the sense of purpose, because when all comes to all, the major reason why we are working is not really money. It's thank you so much for that. So have you in running this enterprise, in running this business, has there been any place where you failed and you learned so much that you thought it is better we failed so that we learn how to do this thing better? Has anything like that happened to you before?
I think the biggest concern that I've always had is that the technology that we've built, while it's won prizes and so on, that it doesn't actually work in some situations, right? And for all sorts of reasons. And there's a lot of complexity around, using different operating systems and using different devices. And so there have been occasions where perhaps, we haven't done enough testing on the product in different environments. We've been in principle able to do it, but operationally, I think it's that focus on the operational side that has been more and more important and more challenging, right? So how do we deliver potentially 200,000, 1 million software licenses in India, for example, right? So you can talk about, you can talk about the commercials and all that sort of thing, but the actual, I think the biggest fear I have and have had is that the operational side will not be robust enough, right? There have been 1 or 2 occasions where that's on a small scale, fortunately. But I think that focus on the customer services, as I mentioned, and the complexities of actually delivering software is not something that I had really fully grasped until fairly recently, right? And that's where my team has had to step up and take responsibility. Probably they get a lot more responsibility than they would in a much larger operation.
Which is good for somebody who is just starting, who wants to.
Yeah, and they get a lot of variety, because there's always different things happening.
That's good. That's good. So everyone in EdTech talks about impact. How do you measure impact?
Right. This is where the data comes in, and this is where my inner researcher comes out, because what we're starting to look at now is not just the obvious metrics of time and percentage, but we're looking at digging deeper into that and interrogating our own learning management system and finding out, just to answer that question, what is it that makes somebody succeed in our program and get through to the end, and what makes them drop out, right? And that means constantly evolving, constantly looking at what's happening, and asking questions. It's that business of asking questions again. So we're going to be asking a lot more questions of our data. Is it, for example, what impact does a person's native language have on their ability to learn English? I actually spent about 4 years researching that once, but purely in the context of intelligibility. So I did something that probably was ridiculous looking back on it, but I was teaching a lot of Nigerian students at that point.
Really?
Yeah. And their grasp of grammar and vocabulary, well, was fine, because they were familiar with English. But they had difficulty in communicating. They had difficulty in being understood by native speakers, right? So I was focusing in on what it was with their speech, if you like, that made it difficult for people to understand them, even although if you saw it written down, it would be perfectly easy to understand. It was that the spoken side of things is something we focus on a lot, because when you're learning online, it's the thing you do least. You don't speak, right? And we're constantly looking at ways of changing that and of improving that. And just recently I had a meeting with the DWP, and they said our clients will come in and say, for example, I have not spoken English since the last time I spoke to you. Well, I didn't say it quite as fluently as that, but they made that point, right? I only speak to my DWP job coach once every 2 weeks, and I don't speak English in between that. That's in Glasgow here, right? And so their language is not going to
improve.
Improve, right?
Unnecessary.
Right. So that's something that we're looking at, and I think increasingly technology is giving us options to do that. Right. We've built a lot of speech recognition but the impact, I think. Obviously we can judge it on the basis we use a lot of assessment, right? So we assess people at the beginning, very, very quick. Then we assess them middle, we assess them at the end of the program, and so we can measure quite accurately what. We're fortunate in that there is a universal, European scale that everybody uses to talk about language development, whatever language it is, and we use that a lot to help us see where people are moving up the scale. So that is a measure of impact. And we have a lot of feedback loops, especially with the latest products. We're giving people the opportunity to just click on an activity and give us feedback there. Our mantra, if you like, is that nobody should ever be stuck thinking, why is that wrong?
Oh, nice.
They should always understand what they did and why they did, why it's not right, for example. So it's a whole combination of factors, but it's the one thing that everybody wants, impact. And we are now engaging with a company who will, at the end of a program we're doing at the moment, will be looking independently at an impact evaluation. And that will encompass not just learning, but also economic impact, social impact.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Economic impact, social impact. Let's talk a little bit about that. And of course, I'm sure you will have. Do you have any stories of anybody going through this platform and their life changing for the better, maybe by having better opportunities?
Well, yes. I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do at the moment. Because we have a lot more. We're much closer to our end user in Glasgow. We can follow their progress from when they enter our program through to, ideally, whether they get employment at the end or get into training, right? So we're measuring that very closely.
Okay, is it just starting?
Pardon?
Are you just starting that?
We're tracking it.
I'm asking if it is just starting.
Just starting?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've completed the first 12 weeks of a program.
Oh, nice.
Right. So we have data from that. And I have brought in another member of staff specifically to work on that aspect, right? Well, we call a partnership manager. So she is focusing exclusively on post-course, what's happening to people after they finish the language learning. The language learning is really just a step to enable them to move on with their lives and hopefully become independent and earn. Some of them, of course, are very highly qualified and unable to work at that level in this country because of their language skills. Right, so that's a challenge for us. Obviously we're constrained, like everyone else, by the job market, by the availability of vacancies, but we're increasingly, moving into that space with additional content to help them. We work closely with the School of Art, and they develop simulations. They work with us to develop simulations for people, so we can give them a very real experience of what it's like to walk into an interview, right? Like a video game, if you like. And they're asked questions and they have to respond instantly. And we can analyse the responses, that kind of thing. And we do the same thing for what's it like, for example, to turn up to a building site on the first day. What can you expect to happen? What questions do you need to ask? What do you need to know? So we can give them that experience virtually before they go into the workplace. And we're moving, I suppose, more and more into product development in that space.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So if a government body or a college, which I think are your customer, am I right?
Our customers are increasingly not college students.
Government?
They are, effectively, the referrals that we are in Glasgow anyway are coming through the DWP.
Okay. So
right, so they are people who may have been to college, right, or may have been in the country for a long time, but are still not able to work for one reason or another.
Okay. So if a government organization like DWP or somewhere in the world, if they are watching right now, what kind of results can they expect if they roll out Click to Learn?
They can, I think that the prime objective we had at the beginning was to make the learning suitable for an individual without support, because in most cases you can't wrap around a lot of tutor support. We can in here because it's a relatively small number. If you start going to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 200,000 people, you can't. It just logistically is impossible, right? So we designed the software in such a way that it does the tutoring for you. It guides the student, right? And that's why, in many ways it's quite different from Duolingo, because they're not simply learning phrases and words and learning to repeat things. They're learning the building blocks of the language so that they can say what they want to say, not what you're just telling them to repeat. Okay? So I think that it's, I suppose it's encouraging people to be autonomous learners. And that's quite a challenge for quite a few, I suppose, mindsets or cultures where learning is seen as going into a classroom and there's a teacher standing at the front and you listen to that teacher, you do exactly what that teacher tells you, or not maybe, and that's how you learn. But we're trying to change that, I suppose. Well, it's always been possible to learn by yourself, but we're giving people the tools, if you like. So we always say to overseas customers, we're not trying just to get your people to pass your exams. We're trying to give them another way of learning by themselves and exploring learning and just enjoying it.
Explore learning and enjoy it.
Because if it's not fun, people switch off.
That's very true. You are only on your phone pressing it and maybe another notification comes from Instagram. You just swipe it and go. If it is not fun, which is...
I think there's a lot of evidence to show that the attention span of the younger generation now is reducing. Okay. And it's not surprising. We talk to the tutors every week that we work with in Glasgow, and we've had people coming along to lessons and not wanting to switch their camera on. Okay, which culturally maybe a reason for that, right? But when one of our tutors challenged a student who had his camera off, he blurted out, "Well, sorry, I was on TikTok," right? So that's the kind of thing you have to be aware of, right? The human reluctance sometimes to work, or distraction. Distraction is always an option, right? So, yeah,
distraction
that's the reality.
is really a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talking about social mission and business growth, how do you balance the two?
I don't think they're not incompatible.
Okay.
Right? They're certainly not in terms of what we do, and I think the buyers that we work with fully understand that the big goal, the main goal, is not just being proficient in English. The main goal is then sort of life opportunities, right? Which is where the social impact comes in. If you're able to work at the level that you want to work or are capable of working at, then that is a much bigger prize to go after than simply saying I passed an exam in English.
So you've spent over 10 years trying to merge technology with education. And what lessons have you learned?
It's a very hard thing to do.
Maybe one or two things.
Yeah. It's actually also a very exciting place to be.
Okay.
Because, I mean, if you've come from an educational environment, as I have done, you realise that it's not an abstract thing. You're actually impacting people's lives in very, very significant ways. And sometimes, I think, as teachers, we don't necessarily even fully understand the impact that we have on people, because they often don't tell you, until much later, if they do. So I think it's that combination of something abstract like technology, combining that with real people, and finding ways to make the two work together. That's been it's a driving force, and it's always changing. There's always new things coming up that you think, oh, if I did this with technology, I could achieve that for these people, right? And that's where the buzz comes. That's where the drive comes from.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Talking about the buzz, talking about the drive, what's the next thing you are looking for in the next couple of years? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I think, brutally, honestly, it's probably moving the company on, right? Being able to step back myself, being able to bring in a successor, and being able to access markets that we haven't reached yet, because we're a pretty small company, really. It is just looking for, potentially exploring the opportunities to take the company to the next level, which will be not my job, but down to somebody else. And I'd like still to keep an eye on things, because it's been a bit of a baby to bring up, right? But that's really and I think it's where most tech companies will go anyway. They'll be taken over.
So this question is more of a utopia question, which is, if everybody on planet Earth, this planet, has access to Click to Learn, how would the world look like? Or how do you want the world to look like with Click to Learn?
I think the easiest thing to answer with that question is to think about what we're doing with our most advanced course, right? Because we've always tried to combine language learning with the real world, right? And that's, I think, we're moving into more and more. Just giving people the opportunity to both understand the world better and to navigate their own path through it more effectively. With our advanced course, we have a very, very strong theme of climate change, because that is something that everybody, nobody can escape, right? Every country has its challenges, and we've deliberately built in that theme so that, as well as learning English, people are also learning about what is happening in different parts of the world. We have a sort of end of module quiz which has a climate theme running through the 10 modules of the course. All the assessment that we do is based on content around the saving the planet, if you like. The biggest problem that every country has at the moment in some form or another is how we cope with that and how we cope with the changes. So we're trying to give our students the opportunity, to have the language to cope with that, because it is a global language. It is the global language, wherever else it might be. But also combine that with the biggest global problem that we all face.
Wow, that's very, very thoughtful. Like, I don't know how you are able to combine the two, which is, I think it's amazing.
That's the fun part. Yeah.
Wow. So, do you think, as a teacher yourself, as a former teacher yourself, do you think teachers will be essential as AI seems to be taking over? Most people are wondering if AI will take over everything. Do you think AI will take the job of a teacher, for instance?
Not completely, no. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all relate to people rather than to robots, right? And I think there's a tendency for techie people to get carried away, and think, well, not ask themselves, why am I developing tech in it to do this, right? I went to a hotel recently in Glasgow, and everything was done through an iPad. Are we developing a race of people who can't pull blinds down, right? Who have lost? What is the point of that technology? Okay, it was quite convenient, right? But I feel that something like that has less value, if you like, than what does it add to my life that I was able to press something and, it's that kind of, I suppose, that questioning, what is the point of technology? What does it really add to people's lives? And I think that will never completely replace human beings. I still prefer, if I go somewhere to speak to somebody, than simply to find a console that I have to interact with, and sometimes it'll ask me for a 6-digit finger, and I don't have that. That kind of, if technology is not doing things faster for you and more simply for you, it's not working. And sometimes that is, I know it's cost effective, but when you ring a company up to ask something, do you want to speak to a human being or do you want to speak to a telephony chatbot? There's still, I think, a choice to be made there. And certainly as far as education is concerned, it's that relationship with a human being that can often be more impactful than a relationship with an app.
Wow, that's really amazing, incredible, because I'm thinking about this podcast. Some people say they would like to do it over Zoom. I said, yeah, fine, you do your own over Zoom. I like talking to people face to face,
Yeah.
There are some things that I don't think AI will completely remove the human factor. We still like human being, whether we like it or not. So moving on to the last question, which is your legacy. What do you want entrepreneurs, EdTech, tech entrepreneurs, any form of entrepreneur to learn from your journey of the last 10 years?
Don't give up. Right? Sometimes that's easier said than done, because if you've run out of money, then sometimes you've got no choice but to give up. But I think it's I think probably in many ways it's easier now in the EdTech space because of AI, if you like. That does enable us to do things faster, smarter than we used to. When I think of how long it took to develop our first course, and the way in which we've got tools now that we had to have human beings for in the past, but these tools can do the job just as well, or almost as well, well enough, right? So I think, yeah, but be selective. Be selective about what tools you use, what technology you use, and always focus on, what is the point of doing it? Who are you benefiting? If you're not really benefiting anyone, then maybe take a step back and think about that.
I think 2 more questions. I want you to finish this sentence for me. This is sort of the game we play at the end of the session. Education is, what is education for you?
I think it's the most fundamental thing that you can acquire, which allows you to cope with whatever life throws at you.
Wow.
Right.
That's so thoughtful of you.
Difficult to sum up, but if you have that knowledge and understanding, I think it enables you to be more resilient, because inevitably there will be difficulties in everybody's life, but having an understanding of the world and yourself helps you cope with that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's so philosophical. That's the end of the podcast.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.